What is this?
Giving you the mold making power.
Oh, okay. All right.
To not sleep.
I'll be all right.
Can you see him right here?
No, I'm invisible.
Pasha can't find the long cable today, so he's got to cuddle.
Yeah.
He's sitting so close. His feet are going to be up. He's going to have an airplane neck pillow.
Hi, guys. I'm like literally. Yep.
I'll hear him breathing when he falls asleep. This is a long sequence, and it's really for people who are a little bit crazy. Okay, hi, I'm Michael Joy. Welcome to another Hand-ufacturing how-to. Today, we are getting into something a little more advanced. I've watched a lot of videos online and what they're calling a matrix mold. I never used to call it a matrix mold, but Wikipedia says that's legit, so I'll go for it. Mold makers in general make up a lot of words on their own because they work alone. So I call this, in past, a poured blanket mold, but I feel like it's more appropriate to call it a hollow pour mold. I would call this intermediate level, and we are going back to 1997 when I shot this sequence. If you're just jumping into the channel, you'd be like, why isn't this guy making videos? Well, we do, but there's a procedure that we're following. This is really great instructional information that I wrote for a series of books, and I think the photographs allow for some freeze frame moments, and they compensate for missed pieces in videos. I see a lot of videos and they take time to show someone drilling a hole or putting packing tape on something. I'm like, man, that's just not the guts of it. I want to get to it. So let's get to it. Here's the thing. This is a long sequence and it's really for people who are a little bit crazy. I mean, you gotta, Pasha's right here, he's still awake, I'll talk to him. You really gotta want this. Making a hollow pour mold is really kind of a work of art. And in my mind, it's also a bit of a chess game. In my shops over the past decades, the chess game was really just with myself, and I use chess as a reference because you need to see steps ahead. And it's hard to see steps ahead if you haven't done something already. That's the beauty of the internet, is you guys can fast forward into things you haven't done, and it gives you a lot of clues. So I'm gonna show you this piece here. I guess I was about 30 years old, and I'd closed my first business. I was burnt out, and I was working out of my parents' house, and I had this tiny little studio in a bedroom, so there wasn't even room for a tripod. I had to get in there, take a picture, pull back, whatever, violin. It was fun. I was into it. Let's do this. All right, so here we go. The orientation of this was a glazed ceramic piece that my stepfather made. He was a sculptor. He made this in the 60s. It's an Art Deco baboon. You'll see it in with the front view in a moment. But the orientation is this. The ceramic piece is pretty durable, so I don't have to take a lot of other steps to protect it. Some people will say the first thing you have to do is put saran wrap over it so the clay doesn't stick. This is the beauty of mold making. You adapt for each object that you make. If you try to follow the same rule for all shapes, you're gonna crash. So the first thing I did here was I put the baboon down and I outlined it with a yellow oil marker. That'll be all of these orientations for these hollow pours is really important. The second thing I'm doing here is I rolled out these thin slabs of oil-based clay. They're somewhere between, I would say, close to a 1/4 inch thick. And when you put these slabs on the model, you want to match the contour. But you have to remember that the contours cannot have undercuts too much, or else you'll cause a lot of trouble. So behind the ear, I'm going to fill it in. And then, let's see what I have here. Yeah, so if you fast forward here, I filled in all of the gaps with clay, and some places are much thicker than a 1/4 inch, like behind this, where's my mouse here? Like behind this ear, I rounded out because my parting line is going to come right up the middle, over the top, down the center, down the nose, and around the front. This track here is going to be the silicone lip. In fact, everything that you see in clay right now and a few other additions are going to be silicone. And this lip right here is what's going to fold over the outside of the mother mold to hold it stable. This is what I mean by you got to kind of be a chess player thinking ahead. Next thing I did was I started to build the parting wall. It's about 1.25 inches thick, tall. Now I've added a few things here. I've added what I would call a flow channel, because I'm gonna have silicone that pours in here and it's gonna flow down here. It's gonna hit this channel and come down here. It's gonna go over here and flow around here. When you have the clay that is a certain thinness, the silicone has to flow through that. And it can take a really long time to flow through that, because what happens is once you pour silicone right here, it kind of blocks up, and you have to wait for it to syrup down before there's room for more silicone to go in. So if you put these flow channels, it's like expressway, and you move the silicone around the model quite quickly. And you have to have, in my mind, in my opinion, 2 openings here to allow for venting, because if the silicone's going in, although the mold is empty, it has to displace the air. These are plastic natches. They're going to be sacrificed into the mother mold. And now, although the picture looks the same, what's been added are these wooden keys, these little triangle keys. The triangle keys extend through the clay to the other side, and this is actually what's going to end up registering the core of this baboon that we make later. It's going to be a 3-piece master mold. There's going to be 2 sides, the baboon head, and a plate that connects the head, and they're all going to fit together. I think we showed a picture of that at the beginning. This is just an orientation shot of the other side of the baboon that has been, you can see the dividing wall has been stabilized, and I haven't put in the flow channels yet here, but you can see the key extension right there, so it's coming. All right, now what I've done is I've added this extra retaining wall around the outside. This is going to catch the first layer of mother mold, which is actually the case, the master case, because when I start applying it, it's going to be kind of a gel coat, kind of liquidy, and it's going to want to flow all over, and I want this base right in here around this key to be a thick, even chunk. So I'm trying to control the flow right away. Here's a top view. You can see the gap spacing right here. This is all going to be for the rigid case, and this is all going to be the silicone. This is just a reference reminder picture. That's a pretty crappy little jar. But PPC, I used to call this, polyurethane parting compound. I would buy this from a company called Permaflex. I think they formulated it, and it was one of the best release agents that I ever found. It didn't inhibit the cure of tin silicones. It was great for urethane. It really sealed things nicely, and it was a go-to. So I would go between PPC and Vaseline. Now what you can tell is that I've put this kind of gel marshmallowy coat directly on the clay. Now, if I hadn't had the PPC on the clay, this is, what I'm making the mother mold out of is not hydrocal, it's a hybrid. It's a material called Forton MG. And Forton was a brand name, I think they called it Duo Matrix, and then, I don't know, before that was Jasmonite. I don't even know if they make this anymore. I chose to work with that over fiberglass or urethanes because I didn't want to take the hazard hits on some of the chemistry, and I felt like the gypsum, it was a modified gypsum. Sorry, let me back up. Forton MG, Forton modified gypsum. Modified, it has a dried acrylic resin in it, and then it had some sort of hardener, resin hardener, and then I would mix it with an acrylic polymer, liquid polymer. So it was, I think it was a 4-part system, 3 of the modified and 1 of the hydrocal. And you could control that mix to make it pour solid brick-like, or you could add it thickening agents such as Cabosil or other things to make it kind of marshmallowy. So that's a long talk for what I'm actually using here. I won't go into it too much more, but the material is really great to handle. And I just brushed it in, and you can see that this little reservoir wall here is very effective. And there's a part of mold making that if you really kind of geek into the process, you want to enjoy the finished result of the mold is actually going to be your work of art as well as the casting. That's where I was interested in. And if you think about this, this was in 1997, as I mentioned. So there's been almost 30 years since then. So my mold making has really gone a lot further than this. This seems to be as far as a lot of mold makers need to go. I found that there's not a lot of type of molds in the art mold making that need to be more advanced than this. So it was a solo, I don't know, it was kind of my own hike. I climbed the mountain by myself. Now I've added the second backup layer, and this has been Forton MG. I used to call it Frodo before the Hobbit movie. I would call this, this Frodo is glass modified. It has chopped glass strands in it, so it's really super strong. Let that set up. Now I've taken the baboon and I've spun it around. So this is what you're looking at right now. You can see the other side of the case, and now I need to remove all of the extra clay. Here it's been cleaned up, and you can see that the plastic natches have been sacrificed into the case wall here. And you can see my not so clean flow channels on this side of the baboon. Now they're going to get cleaned up. Let's show you. Here it is, boom. That's pretty great. In a video, I would have to speed it up. This is like boom, 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 boom. So the flow channel now mirrors the other side, and you can see the keys have stayed here, and I'm gonna have to put another retaining wall around here. There it is. And you can also see that slight gloss. This gloss is the PPC. Now I've added the PPC to not just the clay, but to the edges of the mother mold here. And I've also put in the positive, the male part of the key, that it will be sacrificed into the master case as well. Those plastic keys, I think we should do a special video on to show people how to use those. They're clean and bulletproof. Oh, well, here's the PPC, and we're gonna get ready to lay this up. Here's the first sort of gel coat, the marshmallowy coat. And I forgot to mention the first time, this actually, for a hollow pour mold, is a critical step because I can't have air bubbles in this gel coat. If I have air bubbles in here, they're all going to transfer into the silicone when I pour them later. So I was pretty tediously careful about making a nice detailed coat over the clay. Now I've backed it up with glass. This thing's pretty heavy right now. It's probably about 6 or 8 pounds for each case. And I was building a mold for this demo to be something that would really last a long time. Remember, I had worked in some shops that molds were there for 100 years. They were architectural molds, and by the time someone found them, they had either been compressed under something else, they were warped and distorted. And I thought, if you're in a company that's making something important enough, you need to be making an archive at the same time. So make it strong enough to serve another generation, because maybe this artist becomes world famous, and now this sort of his legacy foundation can go back to the masters. This happened with the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation, which we were working with later, as a famous architect. Now I've cleaned up the retaining wall around here, and you can see this little edge here. I'm going to clean that up later, but here's my oil pencil. Now I need to make the registration line around the base of the case, because the ceramic baboon has to sit perfectly in the middle, and then the case has to be perfectly spaced around it. Otherwise, there's not an even gap around the model and the case. You'll see it here. Now I'm going to split this bad boy. I know where my keys are. I used to put in lines, like if I had a key right here, I would put a little a black Sharpie marker, because you don't want to cut through your keys when you're splitting a mold like this. Okay, here's the reveal. Oh, look at this. This is just a heads up. I broke this piece here because when I was separating the two parts of the case, I had put the clay in so tight, I just really needed to put it over loose, and I paid the price for it there, and I had to fix it later. Notice these keys stay here, and you can see the two lines. There's a yellow line right here for the outside case, and here's my yellow registration line from the, what did we draw around? I don't remember, the clay. Oh no, it looks like the whole baboon's been moved. Okay, that's what it is. This is the line around the baboon. And yeah, that's what happened. So this is why you have these lines, is you have to be able to bring everything back into orientation. This will be the baboon, and this is the case, and the case has to sit like right there. It can't slosh. Now I'm going to peel this clay out. The important part is that because I use PPC on the oil-based clay, it comes out pretty nicely. Now I'm going to trim up this little shaving tool right in here. Wherever I had clay connecting, the gel coat was so liquidy that it would create these little sharp edges. So now I'm taking this trim tool and knocking down all the sharp edges. They're just not needed. You can see the flow channels here. This is the nose of the baboon. Here's these flow channels in the back. The keys have been sacrificed. They're really good. You have your registration piece. I'm oiling up the interior with Vaseline, because although silicone doesn't stick, it does what I would say tack. It can really lock onto a piece if you have a lot of surface. So this little bit of Vaseline really makes your life easy. Now I need to remount this baboon. When I did it the first time, I just set it on the table. Now I'm going to put a little release agent right on the base here. And this is ceramic, so it's porous, so I have to put that release agent on there. Put a couple drops of Frodo and squash it down. Now I'm going to draw another line around that baboon. I think this is actually a recycled picture. Here's the front shot of this. This was a high-fire baboon. I'm surprised it didn't crack when my dad made this in the 60s. Now we're getting ready to put the clean case around it. The registration keys are still here, and they're going to help me position the case. Also, this whole model here needs to be really clean. Now I take a little bit of, this is an old 202 spray, and put a slight release amount onto the ceramic model. Okay, this is where it starts to make sense. You have this case mold right here, and then you have all of this little tiny space around the baboon. And if you're not good at this, you have to make fat walls. And you'll hear a lot of people talk about the matrix molds that they're making. They're gonna say, oh, make it 1/2 inch. You don't need to if you're good at these other things. You can choke it down to an 1/8 inch or a 1/4 inch if you take efforts to make your registration really good. But it's dodgy. I wouldn't do it this skinny at first. You can also see my silicone lip is gonna be right there. Anyways, it'll reveal itself. Let's go forward. All right, now what I've done is I've sealed everything up. There's clay along this outside edge. Remember, I have a pouring gate here, and there's clay around the bottom because the baboon is only connected to the workboard. Ultimately, we're going to connect that baboon to this case, but that's not there yet. These straps are critical because they're going to keep the case held down tight. What happens is, otherwise, when you pour, the silicone wants to seep out the bottom. There's a lot of head pressure here, and it doesn't look like it, but it's an issue. Now, this shot here is showing that all of the clay that I removed from the case, I kept it. This particular oil clay and this particular silicone was GI 1000 from Silicone Incorporated. I used them for years. It's a good workhorse silicone, affordable. It's kind of 1-to-1 by weight. So all of the clay that I took out, I weigh it, and I pretty much know how much is going to go into the case. It looks like what I've done here is already filled. I poured the silicone in here. I thought I had some pictures of tipping it, but also above the ear, there had to be a little hole, a weep or a vent, and the air has to escape. Let's see where those pictures are. I guess they're coming later because we're going to pour another blanket. This is just the first blanket. Now I'm splitting the case. When you split a mold like this, if you only split in one place, it pinches in the other places. So you got to work the tools in there to get proper leverage. I could put a shim in the top and then split it from the side, and then as long as I keep dropping shims in, when I split the mold, the shims take up space, and that way I'm not just sort of pinching, opening the case. All right, here's the first part of the reveal. You can see that the silicone blanket flowed nicely. I got this lip here, no air trapped, because when I poured it, I pivoted the workboard. This is the beauty of working on a workboard. If you weld it to your table, you're stuck. You can't control any hydraulics. But you can see the flashing here that happened. All this light blue here, that's going to get trimmed off. Here's the other side. I'm going to trim that off. We're ready to go. Now I'm going to take off the silicone liner. At this point, there's no reason for me to cut that liner. If I cut that liner, I'm going to create a seam for something later. And the way that I use this casting, the way that I'm going to use the casting material is those seam lines don't clean up very well. So I really want this glove mold, you know, something that just pulls off like a sock. Here we are, the baboon and the liner. Now I gotta remove the plaster from the model and the workboard. That cleaned up easily because I had release agent. If you're making molds of someone else's fine art, you gotta be careful here. This was my dad's, so I busted it and I didn't have to cry about it. I knew how to fix it. But if that had been a precious cargo moment and you didn't have a waiver with an established value, this is a big deal. You have to be really careful. Mold makers, you can lose your shirt just by breaking someone else's grandma's thing. Now I'm going to weigh the liner, and I've written the weight into the case on the outside. I'm preparing the case again. This time I'm using PPC. PPC gives a more permanent sealing, if you will. Vaseline, you can put it on, but it stays kind of tacky and kind of spoils out. But the PPC seals it like lacquer, and it's quite nice. You just have to shake the jar because it has this like carnauba wax in it that settles out, and you got to keep it stirred up before you use it. Here's where we are. Let's orient ourselves. The left and right side is right here. We have it strapped together. I'm saying all the obvious things, and the liner is seated in perfectly. A lot of people would stop right there and say, okay, my matrix mold is done. But what I want to do is to be able to make, oh, matrix, I used a new word. What's catchy? What I want to do is I want to make a casting inside here, and I want that casting to come up over the edges here and create registration with this Forton MG surface here. So I never have to use that sculpture again. Maybe it wasn't strong enough to use again. What I've done here is I've put in the first layer of my marshmallow gel coat. This is really important to do as good a job as you can. You can see that I've left the ear open because I'm going to tip it on its side. I think I show what happens there. Yeah, what this picture is showing is that I mixed up liquid and then I poured it in the ear and then jogged that little flux brush in there. Now, I want to do both ears, but if I put in liquid here and then I turn it over, the liquid just rolls out. So I've done two things here. I put liquid in and then I capped it with a thicker version of itself, of the Forton, and then I can do the other ear. The other thing that you saw, because maybe I'm running out of time on the set, I can't remember, I've come up over this edge. Everything's going to be covered eventually, but I was trying to be clean for writing this sequence. Now I flipped it and I'm doing the other ear. Look how high tech I am here. I may as well use a champagne glass. I mean, hey, it's what I had. I was working in a tiny bedroom. Just a quick thing, my whole shop, I had closed that shop because I was moving to Colorado. So all of my tools and all of my materials were packed. And I was trying to do this mold making with very little Walmart moments here. Now I have this core. I've completed the casting up over the edge here. And now I'm going to add the glass coating all around here. You can see I've added this retaining wall here so that the base plate that I'm making isn't all uneven and wonky. I really like to control the thicknesses when I can. There you see, I'm glassed out. The clay has been removed. And this is the point where I see a lot of people using Surforms or grinders. If you're making your cases and your plugs out of fiberglass, I don't really like using grinders. I would trim with shears as green as the material can be, because when you're using a grinder, you're putting all that dust in the air. Remember, I'm in a freaking house right here, so I want to be very careful. So I trimmed this at the state where it was kind of like a tough toenail. Just trim it away. Now I'm going to split the case. You have a bird's eye view of the case, the liner, and the plug underneath. So this process repeats itself because I'm going to not only use this case mold to make the liners, but I'm going to use this case mold to make the mother molds, because I do not want to have to make new mother molds every time. And this was not a 3D printed event, it's a sculpture. So now it's being removed, and you can see this, there's a plaster baboon under here, and now the registration keys that were wood have become Forton. We're all cleaned up around here. We're ready to go to the next thing. Now I'm going to unmold this liner. This was the first liner that we made, number one, peeling it off. Now what I want to do is take a little patch material and patch any flaws into this Forton. The beauty of Forton is that you can patch it like Bondo. It sticks to itself really nicely, and you can sand it with wet dry, and you can polish it with a buffing wheel. So you can bring that kind of that dull glaze finish back to it. It's really a super material, but it's heavy. Now I'm wet dry sanding any areas there. You see, I couldn't do the video. I just had to put the tools in there and say, oh, I'm using the fettling knife, the razor blade, and wet dry sandpaper. This is 1997, guys. Here's a finished shot of what we'll call the core or the plug. I'd say it's the core. A plug sounds a little not as fancy as what this is. It's ready to use. I've patched, it's cleaned. I've allowed it to cure out for a couple days perhaps. Top view, here's the view of the liner and the core. That's not a great picture, but you can see that here's the one half of the case, the other half of the case, the baboon core, the resulting silicone liner. Now, you don't really have something you can use right now, but you have a liner. This mold was to spit out many liners, and the mother molds we're about to make. All right, we're gonna make a second liner. So rinse and repeat. This is where mold making is really tedious. But if you do all this work up front, you can pass off the heavy duty stuff to a junior mold maker. And they don't have to be a pro, they just need to know how to prep a box, prep a case, and pour it. And then let's say you're getting $1,000, $2,000 per casting, and this is a work of art, so you really want to make sure that you're not going to lose your shirt on the quality of casting downstream. So this matters in some instances, but there's very few times that I would make a hollow pour mold. There we go, we're spraying it again. Now we're loading up the case. You can remember last time, this was ceramic, but it was floating free onto the workboard. Now what I've done is I built my own permanently attached workboard right here. This way, when I'm not using this bad boy, the whole thing just gets buckled up and you put it on the shelf and it's good to go. My work table's with it, I can pour it anywhere I want. So this is the beauty of it, just another orientation shot. Everything's locked and loaded. The core, the case, everything's put together. I'm gonna pour in here. You can see a little residual weep from, I think, another pour. A lot of time transpired between this stuff, so I probably made a few of these. The rolling pin. You could tell I was working in a house. Nothing available. So basically, I'm tipping this, I'm pouring in here, and it's allowing this air escape flow. Now that you know the channels, the air has to circulate, and this weep has been plugged with clay. There's really fancy ways to make weeps, and when we do a fireplace, we're gonna do a fireplace mantle, I think next, or two sequences away. You use bottle caps. You cut the top of a plastic bottle off, and I'll show you how to make weeps that you can close off with a twist cap. You can see my 6 1/4 is the documented weight of the liner, so I knew how much to mix up. Tip it the other way. I'm kind of just burping the mold, and I got to give it time for the air to rise out. All right, I'm back the next day, or the next night. Looks pretty dark in there. Looks like I'm using flash. And I'm going to separate this case. Here we are back to where we were before, but we're going to do something different now. Now, we're gonna trim up all this flash, and we're gonna make a very thin mother mold. But the mother mold is not gonna need to come out this far. In fact, the mother mold is only gonna come to the inside of this edge here, because we want the silicone to stretch over the edge of the mother mold. It'll become obvious pretty soon. We cleaned it up, threw some PPC on there. This time I'm not putting in plastic keys. I'm just gonna put Forton right into these keys, and it will have a similar effect. I'm sealed up, PPC, the liner is in place. Now I need to stabilize that case. Oh, I didn't show it. Okay, well, it'll reveal itself in the future. So now what I did is I'm putting the glaze coat, and you can see right here, I stopped, right? I don't do this, I don't do this. It's all of the detail surface. Now, this time, I'm not spending a lot of time dancing around this liner, because this is just a mother mold. This mother mold can have all sorts of pits and gaps in it, and I can get away with it. It's not good practice, but I can get away with it because the liner is already made. It's the case that had to be perfect so that the liner wasn't getting bumps and flaws. The big deal about a hollow pour mold, a pour blanket mold, a matrix mold, for God's sakes, how many things do we have to call it, is that, let's say I have 10 of these made. That means that I'm gonna have 10 liners and 20 mother mold sections. If I put those in a production room and they are not interchangeable, I'm effed. Every piece has to register against itself, because nobody is gonna keep it straight after a certain amount of time. It's just you gotta roll with me on that one. Everything needs to be interchangeable. All right, here's the glass up of the mother mold. Again, I stop here. Looking back at this, I remember that I didn't do a process because this was exhausting. So the process was gonna be that when I did the finished casting of the mold, I was also gonna have a core to do a hollow casting. So I left these registration keys here. We'll express that out in a minute, but let's finish this mother mold. Here you can see the illustration of this is the case. Look how beefy that bad boy is right here. And then right down the middle, this is the mother mold. It's half the thickness. This weighs a lot less, and it only goes to here. So you can see this probably only weighs about 3 pounds, where this probably weighs, I'm thinking 6 pounds, 8 pounds or more. Now I'm gonna split the case. Let me go back. I have to now take this side off, and I need to leave this side on. So I've tipped the baboon, and I'm taking off the case. Now, this I didn't really want to happen. You can see that I've disturbed its registration. So I need to put that mother mold back in place. The liner is still tight, so I can put this back in place, and I'm gonna band it down because it has to be well registered. Yeah, see? This mother mold just needed to be stable so that it's on this registration. Now I'm gonna do the mother mold again as before. Now, in a video like this, you need to take a coffee break. I mean, this takes days and days and days to make this. Not solid days, but you do a few steps, you move on to something else, you come back to it, you're working on another project, And so something that looks really tedious because you're like being force-fed, and you're like, why would I ever make a mold like this? You probably won't need to, but it's really great to understand the process, because my thought is these processes from the old days, somebody's going to be smart enough to take this process and interweave it into something that's being used contemporary with 3D printing or other forms of mold making. So this is great foundation stuff. All right, where was I? The mother mold is back in place. I've got PPC on my parting walls. I do my marshmallow coat, I do my glass coat. Now I have a top view. This is my mother mold. I'm still attached to the liner, which is attached to the core, and I take the opportunity here to clean things up. The sure form is I'm going to clean up these edges. If I don't do it now, it's forever hold your peace, because it turns into cement. And you can see it clogs up these little registration things here, these teeth. And if you don't keep those clean, you just burn through them. You know, it's $4, $4, $4. Sounds cheap, but it's just a hassle to go to the hardware store. Let's split this puppy. Now I'm going to clean up the mother mold, just take off any sharp edges. It's noticeably thinner. This is another thing I don't see a lot of people making. It's not like I saw everything on the internet, but I just haven't seen people doing it this way. This worked very well for me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to build a PVC support case, basically a frame that allows me, when the mold is upside down, it sits level and I can do some casting. So what I've done here is I've cut these plastic PVC pipes, nothing's glued, they're loose fit, right above a resting shelf right here. And then I loose fit a couple pieces of PVC. You notice my mother mold is strapped together nicely. And if this piece was not sitting well, I would simply put some clay under there. The more level you can make it, the better, both vertically and horizontally. Now I've added more Forton, which sticks to itself nicely, and I made this knuckle. But the knuckle cannot be too big. If this knuckle is much higher than this, it's not great, because then it's going to rock on the knuckles here. But you'll see when we turn this over what's happening. The other thing is I need to make sure that I drop down low enough here for a connection point. Now, how long does this take to do the frame like this? You know, if you got a chop saw nearby and the pieces, this is just like, 10 minutes to do the cuts and maybe 10 or 15 minutes to lay up this separate batch here. So it's not super long if you're set up for it. Now what I've done is I've removed my temporary braces. Remember, there was the elbow here and the float pipe, the stand. This is set, so we're good. And now I'm going to throw these 90-degree elbows here, but you'll notice this time I tipped them up. Now I'm going to float above this knuckle here. Before, you probably thought, oh my gosh, you got to be so skinny as not to pass this inset point here. But really, we're lifting it up a bit. All right, here's the finale. This is a production mold. Now, the reason that we have the 2x4 under here is because, of course, this mold is not together and for the photograph. But you can see this beautiful frame, lifts it off the table. It's like a ski jumper. Finished shot. Here's the money shot for a little bit. That liner, this lip that we built way at the back at the beginning, if you weren't playing chess, you don't get this. You have to think about this lip now creates the whole protective layer for the castings to not filter into the mother mold. And these registration points here, which I ultimately didn't use for this sequence, was going to hold another piece that when I poured into this mold for the casting, I could drop a plug in and it would set and float at a certain distance, and that way my casting would be automatically hollow. But I abandoned that idea. Like I said, I was tired. All right, now we're going to move into the casting. This is my favorite casting material. The Forton MG was extremely dynamic. You could add powdered metals to it and it would be great. The thing is it didn't patch well in the sense that it was so sensitive that you could notice the differentiation. So if you're making a sculpture that's for tabletop, which equals eye level, you got to have great care and concern. But if you're making something for an architectural piece that's way up there, it doesn't matter. Those patch marks don't matter. So what I'm doing is I'm mixing up a face coat of Forton MG. I would say it was probably about 600, I have to remember the formula, it's 1997. 600 milligrams dry to, it was 1 to 3, 200 milligrams of polymer, and there was 150 grams of powdered copper in here. I'd have to look that up, that's a long memory ago. Now I'm putting in the liquid face coat. And you might say, well, what the H, bro? You built this mother mold back here, why aren't you using it? Well, it's because I want to do some manipulation first. And because I know everything registers perfect and I don't have to rush, I can take this liner and I can kind of squeeze it about, do a little banana peel, and I can get in there with the brush, and it's very helpful. So here we are. I'm saying that I really enjoyed being able to manipulate this liner because I can kind of squeeze it out and get into all the nooks and crannies. Remember, those ears are problem spots for me. Now I'm kind of rotating this out and I'm going to put it into the case. Boom, lock it up. I also didn't have to put in bolts because everything fits so nicely, and the liner also fit over here. It's just one less thing. Most of the molds I made were bolted, but for some reason this wasn't needed. Now I'm going to continue with the residual gel coat of the copper face mix. And this time I'm coming up around the top of the edge because I always wanted a crack right there I found in the castings. So I'm coming up a little bit over the top. The Forton MG was kind of a nasty material at this one point. And that one point is when you rinse off your brush, that water contains metal powder after a while. And also the polymer, if you wash your brush off, and you let your brush dry, it'll stiffen it up, and you're like, wait a minute, it looked clean. Well, you just take a hammer and you mash the brush again, and you're okay. The water part, though, is a different thing. I didn't know that I was getting my hand in these water buckets rinsing tools, and when they had the metal powder in there, I would rinse that off, and I would, then I would maybe leave the shop, and I'd put some hand lotion on my hands, and then I'd put some lotion on my face, and I was getting metal into my skin here, and I got this rash, and I was like, what the fudge? It took me a while to figure out what it was. So work clean. What do we say? Wear gloves? Where's my gloves? I
wonder if you're wearing glasses too.
Well, I don't know what I was doing in 1997 because I can already see that I'm in the shop now. So we had this little outbuilding, and I'm no longer in the bedroom. So I graduated and unpacked a few things. So maybe I unpacked my safety gear. But you got to watch it with metal-filled anything, from the breathing to the rinse water. All right, now I'm pouring some liquid, another layer. You have to have 2 or 3 layers for this copper to really pound out nicely. And I'm going to glaze it, and I'm going to let some liquid settle into the ear, but then I got to cap it off to do the other ear. Similar process. Basically slush casting, another layer in, capping off the ear so that I can fill the other ear. And the first thing I'm going to do, like I said, is close out those ears. This is not a great shot, but it's a really important shot. This is really important because if my mold was not sitting level on the table, this pour would not level out. Water seeks its own level. And this is a Forton mix that's loaded with perlite. And when I used to use perlite, I also had to add water to the mix to make it kind of this oatmeal effect here. But the beauty of this batch, and this is like lots and lots of testing. Just to say it sounds like easy, but damn it, the discoveries were painful. So what happens is if I have a certain ratio of water with the perlite and I pour it in back of the copper face coat and I let it sit for a day, the water in the perlite is interacting with the copper, and it begins to patina itself. But you have to let it sit in the mold for a day or two in order to see that. So here we go. I've leveled out the pour. You can see my gel coat here, and I'm going to coat this back also. I've turned the mold upside down. I'm going to open it up, removing the mother mold, removing the liner. You can see when it's first exposed to air, it's kind of this purpley quality. I'm being very careful to pull the silicone to pull away from the ears because it's a weak spot. In ceramic, they were made very thin. This is the first reveal. You can see that the water has already begun to interact in the thin spots because these would have been high points in the mold. The ear would have been solid copper casting, so you can see that this is a darker amount here. But where it's thinner, this is where it's going to naturally patina. So let's finish this casting. Here's a close-up of the same. I'm going to shave the bumpy perlite off of the bottom. You notice I have a little bit of a bubble wrap here because this gel coat is delicate when it's first exposed to air. And this Forton copper face coat, it sticks to everything. I mean, you could have a cardboard tube on a movie set and you could stipple this onto the cardboard tube and you'll have a copper column. It was fantastic. I mean, it stuck to everything, including all of your clothing. Okay, here we go. I've glazed out the bottom. This is the result of about an hour of buffing. So you really gotta want this. It's not for throwaway castings. This is for fine art castings where you're really getting some coin for the casting. Now you could make a value judgment about this piece, but if this was coming off of some famous guy who had, it's not about what the object is, it's about the story of the artist and the value of the artist. You, like a foundry, have great responsibility to make sure that the casting is as good as it possibly can be. And you can see, I've not patinaed anything. This is just the natural interaction of the water with the face mix from the back, because the face mix was inside, and then the perlite was hitting it, the water perlite, and the water was mitigating from the inside to the outside. So it's not like there's anything flaky on the surface here. It's like it's a patina from the center out, which is the opposite of what usually happens in patinas. I'm using a fine steel wool. I don't know the numbers, but it was pretty fine. And you got to wear a mask when you're doing the steel wool because it kind of grits out and it will kind of get this weird smell, and you don't want to breathe that. Here I'm hitting it. This is just for the camera. I had a spray booth over to the other side, but if you don't use a marine lacquer on patinaed castings, it's going to continue to oxidize even more. And bronze sculptures have a problem with that. Even the pro ones that are on the bridges and everything, they eventually oxidize. It's kind of our generation that likes verdigris colors and patinas. In the old days, they either painted the bronze or they were dark chocolate. And here's the finished casting. It's a sexy casting because it really looks compelling that it's copper, but it's not, you saw. These are a couple galleries of other different types of castings within the same mold. I just used to buy this powdered metal, different types, and try the same process. I wanted to make a jade monkey, and this looks pretty jade to me. It was a good win. This is a cement casting that's been painted and hand patinaed with paint. This is another cement baboon that has been, it's just a cement casting that's been acid washed. Same thing, different aggregate, acid washed, and I think that's the closing of that. So the same mold can make a lot of different things. So 1997 was a long time ago, right? We're here in 2025, but even at that time, I guess I was about 30 years old, I was extremely dedicated to the process. And although the process didn't allow me a lot of flexibility in behaviors, I had a crappy shop, I didn't have any money, I was scrounging for dollars, and I was between here and the camera. So the safety Karen comments that Pasha is using are legit, but in my daily practices of work, I always took care of myself. Gloves, glasses. The first thing that I ever installed in any shop that I was at was ventilation. So there was always a place to do my mixing, my pouring, things like this. However, the beauty of this process, and the reason that I show it, is I'm likely not going to make this type of mold in the future. I just don't have a call for it. We make different types of master molds in our current facility, and it's a much more high-tech. Some people say, oh, this guy's old school, old school. Yeah, I was old school, but I run a contemporary modern shop right now, and I just don't show all those things. Sorry, some people don't like when you withhold information on the internet, but damn it, dude, this is my business, and so we have to be a little protective. I'll share a lot, but at some point the information highway stops. This is just me volunteering my time. Pasha's not volunteering, and the building's not volunteering. So this is for me a labor of love, and you know, and there's a lot more sequences that I want to do. But in a few years, I'm not going to be doing this. Mold making is really only about 20% of my brain, and we have some other projects we're going to get to. I want to throw down all of these technical videos and then get to the art making. And with the art making, I don't want to slow down. I want to work my real speed. I want to make art that I want to make. I don't want to have to stop and explain things. I just want to be like, boom, 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 here's what I'm doing. And in the video, I'll be able to say, remember we made that hollow pour mold? Video number 238, please go look at that, because I don't want to keep repeating the basics and the basics and the basics. So I hope that you get something out of this, but you got to be pretty crazy to even make it this far into the video. So thanks for watching. More to come.